Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, where we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name is Jeremy Downing.
I'm William Chen.
And I'm Sarah Watt.
And each month at Cinema in Context, we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective with some connection. It could be the same director, the same actor, or a similar theme. This month, we're discussing Nomadland, which is kind of in awards season, which means it came out at the end of last year for some people, but came out this year for us in Aotearoa. And Into the Wild, which came out in 2007. The connection being they are both films about individuals who, whether by choice or not, are living on the road, living it rough, living like nomads or tramps or what are the other ways? Super tramps. So this is the connection, and they both are kind of awards season darlings. I think is probably fair to say. But yeah, let's jump in with Nomadland. William, give us a bit of an overview of that film.
All right, so Nomadland is a new movie from Chloe Zhao. Came out in 2020 in a lot of places. And it features the travails of Fern, played by Frances McDormand, who is from a town that's just completely shut down by the corporation. With nowhere to go, she ends up living in her van and traveling across the Midwest and towards the Pacific coast on a search for jobs and meaning.
Nice, brilliant. And Sarah, give us an overview of Into the Wild.
Into the Wild, released in 2007, directed by Sean Penn and adapted by Sean Penn from a book by John Krakauer, is the true life story of a 23-year-old young man called Christopher McCandless, who was, by all accounts, an A-grade student in the United States, who had sort of very strong principles around anti-capitalism and consumerism, who decides to abandon his family and his old life, get rid of, literally burn his money, and take off into the wild, where he sees out his days enjoying nature and meeting random people on a sort of a traditional road trip trajectory film. And it's a fairly devastating piece of real life.
Brilliant. And I think on that note, it's worth mentioning that we will be spoilering both films. I mean, they're not hugely spoilerific films. There's not great twists and turns. It's not the purpose, I would say, of either movie. But just be warned that we will be talking about the events of the movies. And you're mentioning about Into the Wild being based on a true story. Nomadland isn't based on a true story, but it's pulling on some very real realities, which I guess we'll get into in our discussion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who would like to start?
Oh, I'll start based on that recommendation. I found both movies to be really exciting in that they have very documentary-like lenses to both of them. Both movies use a lot of non-actors in major roles as well. They visit these subcultures which are very, very real with the real people inhabiting them and treats it as part of this world, so much so that, especially in Nomadland, it kind of bleeds fact and fiction together to create something that is unique in its wholeness. And like Chloe Zhao has done this before with The Rider. I haven't seen her first film, but The Rider, which was her previous film, is brilliant. And it's all about an actual person playing himself and a fictionalized version of his life, but shot in a way that incorporates real aspects of the real world. And everything just feels so much more lived and so much more, I guess, worldly. Yeah.
That's the brilliance of Chloe Zhao's movie, isn't it? That she cast Frances McDormand, who is... We came out of the pictures having seen it, and we were... my husband and I were lauding her performance and saying, I wonder if she'll be Oscar nominated. Yes, she probably will. And actually, not in cruelty, I said, but you know what? She was absolutely as superb as I expect Frances McDormand to be. So, to me, in a way, she hadn't gone that extra mile because there's nowhere further for her to go, if you know what I mean. And she was utterly brilliant at playing a really genuine, real-life person. I love the fact that her name is Fern, but of course she's Frances McDormand, and that the only other actor in the film is David Strathairn, who's called Dave. And both of them are pitch perfect, aren't they? There's no jarring of, well, there's the actor who's been interposed into this real life situation. And therefore, for me, total lack of condescension or patronizing or anything that might be considered a little awkward about putting an Oscar-winning Hollywood actress into a gritty film about homeless people, you know, that sort of thing.
I loved her performance, and I hear what you're saying, Sarah, in terms of her delivering what we might expect of Frances McDormand. If I compare this role to her work in Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and Fargo being her last, I guess her two biggest pieces that I can think of in terms of the Oscar season, she's doing quite different work in each film. You know, Three Billboards, which we've talked about on this podcast before, and I was not a fan of. Her performance was great, but her character was so unlikable. I found her very unlikable and very harsh and hard, and quite arrogant. And then, you know, Fargo is one of my favourite films, and just this wonderful presence on the screen, and she rightfully has become one of the biggest heroes in cinema history with Marge Thundergaard, is it? No, Marge... Lundgaard. Thundergaard.
Yeah. But she's acting in both, isn't she? You can tell they're characters.
Yeah. But this one, she's lovely. She's absolutely lovely.
She's like a real person.
It's heartbreaking. I actually cried multiple times in this film. I watched it on, I think, a Sunday morning, and it just took me by surprise. I started sobbing, and it was when she joins with the kind of messiah, the leader, the guy who's teaching them how to look after themselves in RVs, and it was just a shot of them sharing food and the community and the reality of these older people. And knowing that the United States has been so hardly hit by the global financial crisis. I guess the film's set in 2012. Is that right?
I think it is. I think I remember that there was some sort of
the
time
Avengers.
marker.
The Avengers is on
that's
movies.
right.
That's right.
Is that 2012?
That is 2012, yeah.
Yeah, which feels about right with the closeness
Recession
to the recession. Who are the non-actors in Into the Wild?
Like all the people, a lot of people in Slab City. The guy who created the big old hill with the like God is love symbol
with the neon. Oh, it's not neon exactly, is it? But with the old plasticky signs and whatnot.
A lot of those people were the actual people. Just like in Nomadland, like the Bob Gale, the guy who runs he is the real life YouTuber who runs this festival every year.
I think everyone in Nomadland played themselves, except for
Strither and McDormand.
Yeah,
yeah,
which is extraordinary because they too were absolutely marvelous at being in this sort of acting space of knowing that they're on film, obviously, because it's not a documentary. So there was probably some direction as to what to do, maybe, you know, and yet nothing jarringly like, oh, you can tell that's a real person. Because you know how sometimes I've seen amazing films, for example, like The Insider, just to do a massive tangent, wonderful Michael Mann film that I absolutely adore, that's based on truth. So it's got Al Pacino, Russell Crowe playing characters, great. And there are a couple of people in that film and you think, hang on a second, I feel like that court reporter's a real person, or that judge, and sure enough, they're the actual real people. You know how you can sometimes just sort of tell, whereas in Nomadland, it's pretty seamless, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
I loved her friend. What was the name of her friend that she kind of reconnected with? I mean, she had a few of them.
Oh, yeah.
Not the one that passed away, but
Linda.
Is it the one that sent her the video of the bats or the birds?
Oh no, that was Swanky who did pass away.
Oh, was it the Swanky send her that?
Yes, because she went to Alaska to see the swallows.
Oh, right.
But Linda's the one they're cleaning the
bathroom.
Yeah, I loved it. Of course, it's Swanky. I totally missed that moment. I was thinking, why is Linda sending her birds? But yeah, she was lovely. Linda and their relationship. You know, you just get this real sense of just their friendship and their support.
Apparently, I read somewhere, you will have read more, I'm sure, particularly William, but I'm sure I read somewhere that a lot of the people in it didn't realise Frances McDormand was an actor, let alone an Oscar-winning actor. Performing with her.
I think she lived in her van for a while, didn't she?
She would, wouldn't she?
Yeah.
She'd go a bit method.
Yeah.
I thought it was a deeply sensitive film, a deeply kind and compassionate film, and even though the message is strong that capitalism, I guess both anti-capitalist films, aren't they, in their way, obviously? Strongly so. And so, capitalism is destroying people's lives. But I love that scene where she this is Fern, Frances McDormand's character, bumps into her friend in the hardware store or whatever, and the daughter says to her, I hear that you're homeless, and she says, no, I'm not homeless, I just don't have a house. And I thought, what a wonderful distinction. I loved the honour with which the people who were choosing, even if it wasn't an entirely their choice, but you know what I mean, at least making a choice to live small, to live simple, and to travel and to absorb what the world and nature and the earth has, without it being like, oh, how kooky, look at these hippies, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting, the choice thing, because the scene that's sticking to my mind right now was when she's with her sister and they're very rich situation, they're friends, and they're talking about, oh, I really should have sold my other house to pay for the thing, and then they say, oh, you know, you're so brave, Fern, for doing that. And she's like, well, F you, like, this is not why I'm doing this. And I don't know, is it a choice? I mean, she's in a rock and a hard place, and she's getting the work that she can, and this is what she can afford. And
but it's sorry, Sarah. It seems like throughout the movie, with both her sister and with Dave's family, like there is an aspect of choice to her, right? She chooses to go a certain direction, and the people around her who do not, or used to have this mindset, or do not have this mindset, are a little put off by that. And the audience, I think, is a little put off by that as well, because there are options for her.
Because they invite her, don't they?
Yes.
So your room is here. You can stay with us.
In both instances, right?
Yes.
There's a guest house. You can stay here indefinitely. But she decides to not do that and to resume the nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah.
I loved that scene with it is Dave, and he offers her that life, and you just know emotionally that she can't take it, because they've so woven her grief story brilliantly into the reality of what she's doing. And I was sort of thinking, oh, what's the end? Like, the end has to be her resolving the pain of her husband and losing his town. I didn't even think of her going back to the storage unit and back to the city, but it was such a satisfying ending. And I think, like, in terms of genre, I was sitting there in the movie going, what is this genre? Because it's not a road film. Like, it is not we'll talk about Into the Wild, because that is a road film.
Yeah.
But it's very much it's like a quest for peace or something.
Superman.
So the film owed Fern a happy ending. Like, I think if Fern had a similar outcome to the guy in, I don't even remember what his name is, Alex? No.
Alex.
Alexander's
Yeah.
Supertramp.
Yes, and Into the Wild. I mean, that's just not the film it's saying. Well, with Into the Wild, it is that road film. He's trying to escape. He's trying to leave behind. He's trying to avoid, which, if we think about Thelma and Louise, which we reviewed in our last episode, a road film has to end badly, because you can't just escape from your problems. There has to be a very devastating consequence. And yeah, I thought they did well with that genre, but I was just trying to figure out with Nomadland, which made it quite exciting. I didn't know what story I was watching.
I guess I would say to your she gets a happy ending. I feel more, and you would probably agree, that she gets an at peace ending more than a happy ending. But I do think it's interesting that the two aspects of home, if you will, maybe we could agree would revolve around the people in our life, the home of the family, and the physical sort of environment. And she rejects both of those offers. You can see how drawn she is. She spends time with a little child. You can see that there is this aspect of her going, this could be quite a nice thing, and there's a room here for me. But then choosing neither of those to go off and be her singular self.
I think, like, her rejecting it, they rejected her. Like, she lost her husband, so she lost her family, and her whole town was shut down. You know, so she's...
Oh, I mean at the end, sorry, when Dave has offered, sort of said, you know, you can stay here, is what I meant.
I almost think if she had, at the end of that movie, if she'd ended up back at his house, I thought, oh, that makes sense, because she's had the emotional...
Yeah.
She's resolved.
She has literally moved on in her van.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I like that they kept it with her moving.
Yeah.
But I just think that just the idea of choice, and, you know, like, it's muddy.
Yes.
And that's why I come back to that scene where she gets really pissed off at the rich people, because
Yeah.
she's like, you really, that's what you think I've just chosen this,
Yeah.
and that's the reason why.
Yeah, and I guess I didn't mean, obviously, that she was making that choice from the position of somebody who otherwise had a really comfortable middle-class life.
She's not just hypothetically,
you
like
no, but this is the big
Into the
difference,
Wild.
right? Yeah, exactly. This is the big difference between her and Christopher McCandless, who left behind the auspices of
wealth and comfort. And,
absolutely, and a future, and an academic future, and all that stuff. Can I speak to Into the Wild? I saw it when it was released, and I remember at the time thinking, what an amazing film. It was so compelling, particularly the daring ending, which we'll talk about. I mean, I appreciate it's a real life story. What are you going to do? I thought, wow, this film's amazing. It's so meaningful. It's provocative, blah, blah, blah. But then on the rewatch now, post Nomadland, my God, I felt that Into the Wild was banging me over the head with actors pretending to be hippies. Look, I'm boiling water in a billy. Oh, I'm so sad. And, you know...
He is so sad.
No, but I didn't even mean him. I meant, I don't know...
Catherine Keener?
Yeah.
I think Catherine Keener plays a really good hippie.
She's good, but I'm like, oh my gosh. And there's Vince Vaughn, and there's Kristen Stewart.
The cast is stacked. My goodness.
Oh, and that reduces its
Hal
subtlety.
Holbrook,
right?
What's his face? The general guy from the Iron Man movies. Sorry,
William Hurt,
William Hurt.
Harden,
There we go.
Jenna Malone's voiceover. At the time, I thought this is amazing. Why would you not have the sister's voiceover? This time, I'm like, guys, I get it. Stop moaning on, which is really mean because it's still an incredibly powerful and provocative story, but it felt so unsubtle compared with Chloe Zhao's movie.
Oh my gosh, Sarah! So the first time I watched Into the Wild was yesterday.
Oh,
I completely agree with everything that you're saying. It's fine. Like, I think it's a perfectly entertaining piece of cinema. But man, is it unsubtle.
Yeah.
Everything from the acting, to the dialogue, to the voiceover.
to the music?
The music! Oh, man! The lyrics popping in at just the right time. Also, I found the cinematography to be really distracting. Like, it was almost experimental.
Yeah.
And
Very 70s.
Yeah.
Lots of zooms.
But it
bit
wasn't
of everything.
This isn't Sean Penn's first movie. Like, he's made a whole bunch of stuff before, and it just seemed like it wasn't a very sure-footed or mature take. Like, I burst out laughing at the very beginning where the journal text has this stupid 3D warping effect into the wild, and it is the goofiest thing.
And in fluorescent green. Yeah. And I actually said to myself, well, that's a choice. Because I was like, I'm sure there's a deeper meaning in that choice, and I'm going to reserve judgment.
I felt some of the filmmaking was pretty effective. Like, a lot of the very, very rapid cuts, and I felt like some of that lent itself to a similar tone with what Nomadland was going for, which is just, you know, these brief flashes of someone's existence, right? Kind of building together this tone poem of these moments in a person's life. But then you get to the end of the movie and he's lying on his bed, dying of poison, and the editing just goes out of control.
Yeah.
Like, these flashes to the sky, extreme close-ups of eyeballs, like, oh my god, I'm going into the sky. Yeah, really distracting, and I don't think it's edited very well overall, and it was nominated for Best Editing Academy Award.
But at the time, I think it was
okay,
maybe
I guess
a
so.
thing.
There's a lot of play.
07?
There's a lot of play going on, which I appreciate it, but I agree with you. It's not always effective.
Was it your first time watching it?
Yeah, I watched it last weekend for the first time, and it feels very much of that era, which is There's a few other films that I'm thinking of that kind of connect with it, and it was fine. I just, as the movie went on, I got more and more frustrated with the character because of what we were alluding to before, is that he came from this life of privilege and he chose to go and do this thing. And like, when he's burning the money, I was like, oh man, you're an idiot.
Yeah,
Like,
but he did give $24,000 to Oxfam.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's just from a position of huge privilege.
Oh,
you know, it's not the actual act of burning the money. It was more just the whole idea.
Well, it was the symbolism of turning my life. Turning my back on a capitalist lifestyle,
Well,
right?
I mean, that's such a privileged choice to be able to make.
Sure,
you know?
yeah.
And I
Sure.
think, and the part that really got to me was when, and it got to me. I was thinking about it before the scene came up. I was just like, wow, there's so many people that would love to have the opportunities you've had. And then when he's staying in the homeless shelter, and it's the only people of color. There's all the black men, and I don't know if there's any women, but definitely all the black. Oh, there's the female who, the woman who gave him the bed.
Yeah.
I was like, there's a whole race element that I was thinking about beforehand anyway with this, in terms of inequity in the States, that it kind of hints at, but doesn't really go there. And when he when he dies at the end, I was like, oh, you deserve to die. You're an idiot. You've
squandered,
isolated yourself. And actually, I was reading some criticisms of the film. They were saying, and of the guy, that he was so undertrained, and he did this thing that apparently locals of the area know that story. And they're like, well, he was just stupid. He went and did this thing with no training, and he's I found him really selfish and self-absorbed, and his whole like philosophy. What I will give the film in terms of that is I loved how they had all those parent figures who were desperate for their children, and they were giving him the advice that he needed, and he wasn't listening. And so I do commend the film for building his death as, again, it's that road movie trope. He's running away. He's got all these opportunities to go back.
You're right, actually. That's a nice angle, and an unusually nice angle, that they're making the point, hey, young person, I see what you're doing, but there are people in the world who will be upset and devastated by what you're doing. Just think about that.
Yeah.
Because he did come across as so selfish, so arrogant. And it's an interesting thing, he's 23, and I remember when I was 23, every young man I fell in love with will have been literary and will have, been able to quote Dostoevsky, ideally, and all that stuff, and maybe write poems and have a witty line or a non-witty line for every moment and all that. And it's such a 23 thing, I think it's an admirable trait, I should say. I think everybody should have that. But, when you're 23...
You should read Tolstoy.
But it's the whole, I'm wearing a trench coat and I have a copy of a French existentialist in my pocket as I walk around with my scarf around my neck. If there's any of those people listening, then you guys are great and you're going to be awesome.
Keep doing what you'll do.
Yes. But,
you'll be right wing one day.
But yeah.
I understood that reference.
Yeah. But so...
what's her name?
I can't remember.
Tracy Ullman.
Yes, that's right.
Thank
that's right.
you. It's from that sketch,
yes,
right?
it is.
Yeah. Sorry, Sarah, carry on.
That's all right.
I
don't even know. You're going to have a hard time editing that because I don't even know where I'm ending it.
Well, Tracy Ullman's sketch is a bunch of woke young people and how she's got them to watch Friends. And they can't handle it. And she says, oh, you're all going to be massively right-wing by
that's
the 30s anyway.
That's right. This is a recent one. I've seen this. Yeah, that's very funny.
Yeah.
Like, kind of a counterpoint to what you guys were just saying. I think... But isn't that what the movie is about?
Yes.
Like, we're supposed to think that Christopher is kind of an idiot, right?
Yeah.
Or if not at the beginning of the movie, then definitely by the end of the movie. Like, it's about hubris. It's about coming in to this place that is so hostile to not just white people, but to humans, and to come in with this position of privilege and to think that, oh, I have, some advice from a hunter friend, and I have a book of plants, and that's all I need to survive in Alaska. And so it is a very, hoisted by his own petard situation at the end, and I guess we are supposed to feel sympathy, but maybe not empathy.
Yeah. Like, I didn't really think he had it coming or... he was an idiot particularly. I don't know. Look, it's hard, right? Yes, we're going, well, what a privilege you have to even make that choice. But it's not a story if somebody with nothing decides to have nothing. That's not a story. That's not a provocation. It's not something that a whole lot of maybe predominantly white people are going to watch a movie in 2007 and go, oh, yes, maybe I should consider more that there is nature out there from which I can gain, pleasure or... Enlightenment. And maybe I should look at my life differently. And I guess it's complicated by the fact that it's one guy's real life experience.
Yeah.
And he's leaving behind an abusive family environment.
Well, that's the thing, right? So it wasn't public yet that the father had been physically abusing the family. It's alluded to very strongly in the film, but it's still very light.
Strongly.
But also, I think the degree to which he was physically abusive in that household was not as well known. The book, the biography that it was based on, he knew, but he had agreed to not include a lot of that information for the sake of the family. And
Sean Penn thanks the whole family at the end as well for their cooperation or their involvement or something.
Yeah, but then I think 5 years later the sister came out with...
the memoir.
Yeah, with some more information. I think I did actually quite enjoy Into the Wild, even though the main character annoyed me because it did have that awareness. You bring up the voiceovers by Gina Malone, and that part of the film felt a little bit underbaked. She sort of wafts in and out, and I thought, okay, is she going to have the final word? Which
She kind
of, but it's not. There's a structural thing there, and I think it's interesting you bring up the editing, William. I enjoyed the play. I didn't mind the play around with editing, but it's a long movie. I don't think it needed
2.5
to be.
hours.
Yeah, it didn't need to be that long, and I wonder if with some tidying up and cleaning up, and perhaps making if the film had opened and closed with Gina Malone, that would have been, and she had just had the voiceover. I feel like, and then it could have centered her as not our protagonist, but if she was to take the lesson of her brother and kind of move it on forward, then at least we're not just aligning ourselves to this main protagonist who's a bit of an anti-hero. But the rule of anti-heroes, right, is you surround your anti-heroes with more despicable people so you like them. Well, everyone around him was kind of better than he was.
Yeah.
And yes,
They were super nice people.
Yeah.
Do you know, so I found the Danish couple kind of annoying in retrospect because it was such a stereotype.
Yeah, it was so like mid-2000s. Look at those
Right.
crazy Europeans.
That's right. I mean, my husband popped his head around the corner at that point, and I said, "This is the Danish couple," and he went, "Well, you can tell because they've made her topless, and so there's the stereotype." But what I found really extraordinary was that everybody in the film's like, "Hey, come on over, have some food," and I was like, "Well, maybe that is the way that people are when they're living kind of a little bit rough. Maybe they are much more generous and benevolent and all that, which would be a lovely way to think about the world."
My auntie and uncle, they kind of do up houses. That's their sort of thing. So they do up houses and they
Flippers. Are they house flippers?
Well, not flippers, because flipper I think implies that they just buy it and sell it. But
Yeah.
they will work. They'll live in this
I see.
renovating open house and spend months doing it up. And but they have a van, or they live out of a van, and so they, for the last wee while, they've been pretty much Nomadlanding it. And my uncle was telling me about how they do. They have like there's this young woman kind of by herself, and there's a guy over there in his van, and there's a bit of a rowdy group of teenagers that were in the parking area that they were. So the next morning he made a big pot of coffee, and my auntie was making pancakes, and he went around and gathered the three of them together, and they had this great catch up, and she taught them how to use TikTok. And so I think there is
It
a
probably is
potential.
like that.
Yeah, there is a potential for that.
And you get a bit of that in
connection.
Nomadland, don't you?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Coming back to the judging of Chris McCandless.
The people versus.
The people versus Chris McCandless. I acknowledge that he was probably a special sort of person.
Is it Chris or Alex?
No, well,
Chris.
Christopher McCandless is his real name, but his moniker was Alexander Supertramp. Because you don't, cut up your social security card and all that and then go around America giving your real name. So you log in as your pretend name, right? So for Jeremy, that's what you do
Okay,
for
cool.
when it happens.
I'm taking notes.
But I think, and it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, we all come to everything with our own personal lens. I resented the fact that he didn't send a letter to his sister. Because effectively she's in the same boat as he is. They were patently so close, because at the beginning of the film you think, are they boyfriend, girlfriend, da-da-da. And I thought that was really mean of him to not even correspond secretly. And she says he could have sent a letter via my friends or something. And I just felt that would have been a really less selfish, more compassionate thing for him to do. Particularly as technically he wasn't going away to die. So this was not a suicide mission. Not purposely, So therefore, wouldn't that have been a sensitive thing to do, And I'll meet up with you, sis, one day and we'll go and live our best life somewhere away from our parents. Great. I could handle that,
That's why I find the motivation, you talk about the story, the need for, that's not a story, someone going from nothing to nothing. Frances McDormand's situation, she had everything. She was really happy with her life and empire, and she lost it all. And now she's living in a van, working at Amazon for Christmas.
Oh,
do we talk about the Amazon?
You better.
Yeah, that's about the Amazon scene, and also about a number of scenes in Nomadland. To me, I have down in my notes, the movie is verging into dystopian sci-fi. Just how they shoot these very, very large, inhuman industrial spaces, and like the Amazon shipping plant with just conveyor belts as far as the eye can see, hiring vagrants or part-time workers, and it was horrifying. Like you see footage like this before, but even displayed like this. It's very, very striking. And then later on, of course, when Fern is working at the sugar beet processing plant, and it's just these giant machineries at night with literal mountains of produce that these tiny little humans are moving. And I don't think the movie makes a stronger point than these scenes where it's just about the little guy being crushed under the weight of,
consumerism.
Consumerism for Amazon, also the beets, I guess, because you eat them, but just capitalism, right?
Yeah.
It's the system that's built upon the backs of modern slave labor. And very, very well put without a single line of dialogue.
Well, there's the speech that what's the guy's name who's the YouTuber?
Bob Wells.
Bob Wells. He speaks to that, doesn't he? He talks about that in that scene. But you're right, William. And I hadn't really thought of the horror of that because I was just really fascinated by the mechanics of working at Amazon, and I've seen boxing videos on YouTube before. And the kind of camaraderie as well that she was finding with her workmates.
Yeah,
So I was sort of endeared to that.
Yes.
But I think the suggestion that this, and I guess more than a suggestion, that this is kind of the new normal for a lot of people in the States, it's a really scary thought that that this is the reality. And maybe that's just my very privileged white perspective. I think about the factory work that we have in New Zealand, and I don't know what
I don't
that
really
like.
think about it. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I do think the Amazon thing is I don't want to say phenomenon because probably it isn't that unusual or unique. But listening to a radio interview the other day with a New Zealander who's living in Austin, Texas, and he spoke sort of by the by about Amazon being really amazing and how pretty much every day they'll have some parcel arrive on their front door because you can buy anything that you need anytime super quickly at very low cost. And his point was, wow, America, home of the free, land of the brave, whatever the thing is, land of plenty. But when you think about that, crikey, yeah, Amazon has become what it is because if there is any little thing you need, you will find it and they will get it to you the same day if you have Amazon Prime or whatever. And so why wouldn't you? Oh, it's only $7.93. Yeah, let's get two, and so on.
Well, isn't there's some statistic where we've got more people in slavery in the world in the history of the world.
Wow.
But do they mean actual slavery unpaid, or is it metaphorical slavery?
No, actual slavery. You've got people in prostitution situations.
Oh, I
and
see.
You've got workers being kept against their will. Like I think there's this huge, yes, it's a massive issue. And then you've got people working, in sort of effective slavery or effective poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw another story which was, in biblical times or in ancient times, a household slave would typically be paid a certain allowance to live their lives, and they did the maths, and it's more than minimum wage today.
Good Lord.
In the United States.
Goodness gracious.
And it was a really interesting
Wow.
comparison. Yeah.
But all that cheap stuff. Sarah, when I lived in the States, I accrued so much stuff. Just stuff. I'm going to blame that on Amazon.com because it is so easy to get stuff. And it's so much cheaper, especially when you compare it to New Zealand where stuff is really expensive.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, this thing is literally half price. It's going to appear on my doorstep in 2 days' time.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, you notice also that scene where Frances McDormand goes to their work office and the woman says, look, it's going to be really hard, I'm afraid. She says something like, you should think about retirement. And Frances McDormand says, but I want to work, I like work.
Yeah.
And I think that, of course, is the flip side of the need to work or the Amazon culture or whatever, is that her life has been emptied, sadly, of the man who was her soulmate and, who arguably maybe gave her, I don't know, purpose, whatever. And so, she wants to work because that's the sort of person that she is, as seen by her cleaning the bathrooms in the, it's not a campsite exactly, is it? Sort of, right?
Yeah,
right,
that's okay,
sure.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting as well, isn't it? Just as a sideline, working for the sake of being productive.
Although with all the scenes of her working, I kind of found a sense of unease because especially lugging around those sugar beets, I mean, it seemed very, very hard work.
Yeah.
And my feelings when watching that was, how long is this going to last? Like, how many more seasons can she take of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Particularly with, is it Swanky and her health issues? And again, another, powerful scene from a non-actor, I assume, and a wonderful speech.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, I pretty cried through that as well. And just the reality of, Frances McDormand is not old. She's older. She's not elderly, but there is a lot of commentary about elderly people in that film living a life that I would not want for my grandparents.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of devastating to think that there's, and then the heartwarming thing of them finding that community, which I mentioned earlier, is just wonderfully. It's just a beautiful piece of cinema. That Nomadland was one of the best films I've seen in so long.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to see that it's nominated for Oscars.
Yeah.
And
we're
that
going
is
to
a
have
front runner. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
Yeah, I think it
It
deserves
could
to
easily
take out some stuff.
win Best Picture, I feel, because it is a social commentary.
And not just I know we've got 2 female directors nominated this year, which is brilliant, and I hope one of them wins for the sake of historically. But of the films I've seen, and I haven't seen The Black Messiah, is that what it's called? I haven't seen that, and I haven't seen another film on the
Father?
list. I haven't seen The Father, but Chloe Zhao, best direction I've seen this year of any of those films.
I think she'll get it.
I hope she gets
I
it.
think she'll get it because that she deserves it. I think she might also get it because she's a woman and she's a woman of colour. But I definitely do not mean that to mitigate because she's not actually a good director. I think she deserves it on every ground.
Yeah.
So I think that would be an extraordinary win.
Because the film is so, like, it's the same thing with the writer, right? They're so unassuming movies. Like, it's almost like the polar opposite of Into the Wild, which is very flashy and very, very, cinematic. Nomadland just, at points it feels sort of meandering. At points it feels like there's not enough energy, or that, what was the point of that scene anyway? But it comes together in such a cohesive whole. And the tone of the movie, from all the footage and just from these long shots of dialogue and of people's faces, is wonderful stuff.
It's a portrait more than a narrative in a way, isn't it?
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, William, because I found that it was. I found the pitch of it really strong. I felt I was fully tuned into the rhythm of the film, and I felt quite comfortable with. Tone, you're right. I would say, just in terms of narrative and plot, to kind of get into semantics, I would say it's not very plot heavy, but it's very. The narrative for me was quite strong.
Right.
Like, it was very aware that this is a story of a woman dealing with grief.
Sure.
And it brings that in for a landing in a really satisfying way. I agree with you. Into the Wild it's messy, and I quite enjoyed most of Sean Penn's stuff, but I also find him quite pretentious sometimes.
Well, so I'd love to talk about, just quickly, about Sean Penn, director's purpose. William, I don't know if you've ever taught high school English, but in English, in high school, we like the young people to sort of have a feel for the director or the author's purpose in writing it. And I felt, particularly on this viewing, Sean Penn is Christopher McCandless. There's a,
Sean Penn is.
That's what I mean. He's so ethically driven with his Haiti work, and his his films are very, very morally driven and ethically driven and all that sort of thing. And so I can see why he would be drawn to a work like this, because again, Sean Penn is somebody who will acknowledge his privilege, undoubtedly, and wants to make the world a better place. So there will be something very attractive to him about this young lad who actually wasn't making the world a better place, but was at least rejecting the auspices of having it all. But I watched it through this lens of, you probably would be friends with someone like Vince Vaughn, bombastic idiot, and you probably would quite fancy a little waif like Kristen Stewart, kind of guitar playing, kind of, hey, I like reading. Oh, you do? That's good. I mean, I just was like, oh my gosh. In 2007, I didn't realize that this was cringy and patronizing to women. But now she's like, oh, you're selling books? I like books. And he's like, wow, because I like books too. And you're a girl.
Wait. You play video games? I play video
Oh
games.
my God.
It's like that. It's just to bring up Cecily Strong in Saturday Night Live. She's got a character that she does, which is one-dimensional female character in a male-driven comedy.
Oh, right.
And she's sort of this, very, very kind of one-dimensional. She's like, wow, I can't believe you're so deep. I didn't see it before. And it's that kind of thing, right?
Oh, Kristen Stewart in her vest and knickers, like on the bed. Come over here. And no, because Chris is 23. How old are you? She fibs. Then she lowers it 1 year. Then we get to the fact that she's actually only 16 and he walketh away. It's like, oh, good for you.
Yeah.
You resisted the temptress.
You're so right. It's a very gross depiction of it. I do love Kristen Stewart I like her energy and as an actor. But yeah, she's that. What is it? Not quite. It is manic pixie dream girl. Tropes.
Yeah.
Except that she isn't very manic.
She's not super manic, but it's definitely very pixie.
Yeah, that's right. And therefore, kind of dream girl. But
she's manic in her attentions of him. She's fawning over him and and wandering over. And there's that stupid line from Catherine Keener's counterpart. I quite liked his character, and he says, "Oh, that girl's staring across at you." And we haven't noticed that in the movie. She's just staring. You have to tell us that this is happening.
Oh, he says worse in the next line about how hot she is for him and da-da-da. So, yeah, it's not that nice. And it's not that nice looking at it through a lens of Sean Penn is behind this, actually. Speaking of which, my very first note to myself watching Into the Wild was, whatever happened to Emile Hirsch? Well, I looked it up, and it's not pretty.
Yeah.
It's not.
So that's a shame.
Is it domestic violence? Or?
No, it was some sort of ridiculous situation at a party where he was high. He was on inebriants and alcohol and doesn't remember threatening a woman and strangling her, a studio executive, and strangling her and having to be pulled off her and serving 15 days in prison and blah, 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 blah. But, I mean, it's not pretty. It's,
Sean Penn's... Oh, he's not got a good history.
No, he doesn't. No.
Dreadful,
dreadful man. So... Dreadful genius.
Emile Hirsch was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yes.
He was. He had a small part at the end with Sharon Tate, didn't he?
Yeah. Plus, I mean, I guess it was the year straight after he was in Speed Racer.
He's done stuff,
which we should review sometime.
That
movie is nuts.
I've always wanted to watch it, and
it's so good.
I always, I sort of flip between loving Wachowski's stuff and being like, this is ridiculous. But
that is both, by the way.
Yeah, because Cloud Atlas is like that, right?
Yeah,
I really love Cloud Atlas, but it is a goofy film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like in 2007, Emile Hirsch, everyone was like, oh my goodness, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he did. He did a great job.
I remember all of the casting stuff, like he's going to be the next Batman, he's going to be the new Flash, or, mostly comic book stuff. But he was the next big thing, and post Into the Wild.
That's right.
Well, he's got a very boyish comic booky face, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I always think he's Elijah Wood. He's got that handsome sort of slightly big eyes. And
he's got that. He's got sort of young Leonardo DiCaprio.
He does.
Energy. Well, he did. Yeah. All right. Final thoughts, William.
Right. I enjoyed Nomadland a lot. I did enjoy Into the Wild, but I agree with you guys, it was just too long and felt very, very much of its time. A little messy. Again, everything we've just been saying, it's not bad. It's just, it is a very frustrating watch at times. Oh, also the Alaskan scenery was awesome. That was so good. Actually, all the scenery across both movies was amazing.
Yeah.
The Badlands, where they go to South Dakota and in Nomadland, and Fern is wandering amongst all those very, very alien... Oh my gosh, so good. And also the scene where Chris kills a moose reminds me of when we did so.
Wow, true. Listeners, William has a master's.
Yeah.
And he studied moose in
Minnesota.
Yeah, up in that region.
Lots of similar experiences there. Lots of flies.
Sarah.
Well, similarly, I think both are absolutely beautiful films. As I've said many times on this podcast, I really did appreciate Into the Wild in its time, but it now feels heavy-handed. I don't think I can say that makes it not a good film from its time. Nomadland, currently, superlative and can't be faulted. I think my biggest takeaway from both films is this. I was really touched by, and I think we're supposed to be somewhat inspired by, scenes of people being in nature And even in the Chris McCandless sort of vein, where it's a little bit kind of over the top, just that kind of awe-inspiring, there are a fleet of buffalo running past me, here is a river running wild, look at this sunset or whatever. And I was struck by that in a way that it is supposed to move me to want to experience things out in nature. And the big thing, particularly in the Christopher McCandless story, is there's no mobile phone. And so people were absorbing things without Instagram or any ability to share that with other people. And there's something quite compelling about that, because it certainly nowadays, if I'm out and I'm experiencing anything like that, my first thought will be, oh, I should capture this. And my second thought will be, just leave your phone in your pocket. Who cares? Be here now. And it is what it is. And I feel like that is a lesson that we all need to be sort of re-appreciating in this current day.
Can I just follow up on that a little bit, Sarah? Yeah, absolutely agreed. Like the Alaskan wilderness, even though it ends up killing him, I think the film portrays it in such an attractive way. Like, you completely understand why a person like him would want to spend time there. Like, it's amazing, and yet it's not for us, right? That's like the dichotomy of the whole thing. Beautiful stuff.
And I guess to follow on from that, William, your point earlier about Nomadland, my trip to Nevada and Grand Canyon and Zion Park, Mount Zion, Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon. It was, I was like, oh, I've kind of been to some of these zones, and it was a bit nostalgic for me. With Into the Wild, I have a poster that is, I think, 1,000 movies you must see before you die, and when you've seen the film, you peel a little tab off, and there's a beautiful piece of artwork behind it that captures the movie. And when I bought the poster, I don't think this is the intention of when they designed it, but I just sat down and pulled off most of the tabs, because I'd seen, I think, most of the films. 100 movies, I think. It's 100 films. I'd seen, I think, 94 of the movies.
Wow.
And Into the Wild is one of the ones that I hadn't seen, so I can now go home and pull that tab off, begrudgingly, because, it was fine. I don't think it deserves to be on that poster. And whilst it does some of the job of being a bit complicated with the story, I don't really want to watch this movie again, because I found that lead character just a person I don't really want to spend any more time with. And the fact that he's a true person, all respect to the actual person who passed away, means I'm like, there's other stories that I'd much rather see celebrated.
Yeah.
Like the story in Nomadland, which I think I always have a heart for stories that focus on older people or elderly people, because I don't think we have enough stories about that stage of life. And I thought this film dealt with it in a beautiful way, both emotionally and visually. I agree, it looks amazing. So much desert, and they make desert just stunning. I love the post-apocalyptic connection, and I hadn't really considered that. But this ain't no Mad Max, so
nice.
I can't wait to see what Chloe Zhao does next.
Nomadland 2. It's the return.
It's awful. She's doing the Eternals.
Oh, is it Marvel or DC?
It is Marvel. It's coming out in September this year.
Why do they do that? They
just
get a Patty Jenkins or someone. They go, you just made an Oscar-winning, awesome film. Here, take this one.
Hey, look, if it produces something like Thor Ragnarok, I'm all for it. Thank you for listening to another episode of Cinema in Context. If you enjoyed our podcast, then please share it with your film-loving friends. You can listen to Cinema in Context through SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Amazon Music. There we go, an Amazon plug in our critique of Amazon.
Oops.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, which are great places to let us know what you think of this episode or give us suggestions for future films to discuss and compare. Look out for our next episode in a month's time, which will be our 5-year anniversary.
Wow.
And actually, we're going to release a little mini episode before then, around the Oscars. So keep an eye out in the next couple of weeks, because we're going to have some brief, exciting chats about the films. I'm sure Nomadland will come up then. But anyways, until then, no more order mine!